is a city where tradition and culture work as foundations for growth, connecting the past to the future. There is an ecosystem in place where the city is a central hub, facilitating the connection between stakeholders that get together to support new, innovative companies to be created and to scale up, from academia to corporate, from incubators to R&D centers, from investors to communities. Here, technology leverages on knowledge and enables a better quality of life for all. The city becomes a living lab where challenges from the everyday life are addressed, keeping in mind where we want to see ourselves and how we want next generations to live. Dozens of national and international tech companies have chosen Porto as their home for its work-life balance, good accessibility and infrastructures, uncommon safety levels, great weather, the strong pool of talent, and a vibrant culture.
As we seek opportunities for our entrepreneurs, we are fully aware of how relevant and strategic it is to cooperate in a wide national and international network of partners. When Porto is strongly committed to the movement for an interconnected Europe, where we can have a sustainable, competitive tech ecosystem with opportunities for all, creating a place where people enjoy living and working.
Welcome everyone to this 9th Cyber Investor Day organized by the European Cybersecurity Organization. My name is Alex Barrera. I'm going to be the host for this 2 days of event, and I hope that everyone is connecting and we welcome to this show. I want to say a couple of things about this event for those of you that are new with our event. The Cyber Investor Days were organized they started happening in 2017 with a goal to connect together the cybersecurity leaders and the investors together to strengthen the links of the community around cybersecurity. Since then, we've done 8 editions. This is the 9th edition. So we welcome all for coming together to strengthen the community around a very vital point, which is cybersecurity. The whole point of this is to provide not just insights, but also connect investors with the leaders in the markets, with the leaders of startups and SMEs around the cybersecurity space in Europe. And to do that, we're going to have 2 days to talk about this that is structured into 2 different parts. First day, where we're going to talk today of a high-level workshop on strengthening cybersecurity investments and how important it is to fund the fundamental research, development, and scale-up of the cybersecurity space. And a second day where we're going to have a panel on scale-up startups, but most importantly, we're going to get exposed to a series of pitches around different startups in different stages that are going to be selected to participate in the end to the European Cybersecurity Startup Award. So on the second day, we're going to be selecting, the judges and the investors are going to be selecting 2 nominees for the Pan-European Cybersecurity Startup Award organized by ECSO. So let's see what happens tomorrow. And there's going to be a lot of one-on-one meetings between investors and these companies. So I invite you all, especially the investors that are listening, to start going on the platform if you haven't done it yet, because you can still set up a meeting with our startups. The platform is still open, so there's still plenty of time to listen to them and then request a slot to talk together and strengthen these links. After that, I want to really thank our sponsors that eventually make all this a reality. First of all, I want to thank the National Cybersecurity Center of Portugal, which are our hosts during this event, that even though we are organizing it virtually, we have part of the team in different areas. So I want to send a very, very big hug to our Portuguese friends. And most importantly, also to the organizers itself, to Scale Up Porto, who have produced the whole thing. And obviously, several of the startups that are supporting the ecosystem, which is really powerful when you have the startups coming from the industry supporting us. That would be Brightpixel, MaxVive, and S21Sec. So thank you, all of you, for making this happening, and obviously for ECSO for organizing this wonderful event. And without further ado, I want to welcome our next guest, who's going to give some welcome words, and we're going to start inviting and listening to the words of our hosts. So please welcome on stage, on our virtual stage, with a big virtual applause, the Secretary of State of Digital Transition of the Government of Portugal, Mr. André de Aragão Acevedo. Please, virtual applause.
Good afternoon. Muito boa tarde a todos. I would like to begin by greeting the organization of this 9th edition of the Cyber Investor Days in the context of the C Days. In particular, I would like to greet the European Cybersecurity Organization, as well as the National Security Office and the National Cybersecurity Center for being so active in promoting this important agenda. Let me also welcome to this virtual meeting in Oporto Mr. Luigi Rebuffi, Secretary General of the European Cybersecurity Organization. It is a privilege to be opening this session because this event combines some of the most relevant ingredients to be competitive in a digital world: cybersecurity, entrepreneurship, and investment. The title of this workshop couldn't be more appropriate. When the topic is cybersecurity, inaction is not an option. With increasing dependence on digital, cyber attacks are on the rise, as well as the opportunity to invest and develop on a more resilient and digital environment. If we all agree that there is no market without trust, we must ensure that we create the conditions for consumers, companies, public entities, and governments to truly believe and trust in the digital ecosystem. And this is a multidimensional challenge. We need people and talent that have the skills to make sure that the human element is not the weakest link on the cybersecurity chain. We need competent cybersecurity professionals, and there is now a tremendous and unprecedented demand for security experts who are able to identify and provide protection against cyber attacks. We need to increase the number of students and professionals investing in cyber skills. Many companies and multinationals are looking into Portugal as a great location for cybersecurity centers, exactly because of the quality of our talent and our universities. But we need more. We need policies that contribute to increase digital trust, like the Digital Maturity Certification that we will be launching in Portugal in the coming weeks. We are developing a digital stamp to ensure that the digital environment is safe and worthy of trust, as well as to raise awareness to 4 areas included in the digital stamp, and that are all of them crucial: cybersecurity, privacy, accessibility, and sustainability. We believe that the attribution of a stamp is a factor of induction of value in a particular product or services, contributing to the increase of competitiveness, the internationalization of our companies, and of our economy. The creation of this digital stamp on cybersecurity will be extremely relevant, not only because it is the first example in Europe, but also because this new Portuguese certification model will be totally aligned with European and international standards. The international recognition of the Portuguese digital stamp will be crucial to intensify its added value in promoting a safe and enriching environment in accessing to information and communication technology, as well as contributing to a greater globalization of the digital and cybersecurity market. In the development of this project, I would like to highlight the great involvement and contribution from the official national entities responsible for cybersecurity in Portugal, the National Cybersecurity Centre and the National Cybersecurity Office. With the initiative, we expect to create a simplified certification procedure that allows organizations to transparently know the requirements that they must comply with and the procedures to be followed. This stamp will surely be of relevance to the consumers and businesses that will be able to make their decisions based on a trustful certification scheme. Ladies and gentlemen, if there is a lesson to take from this pandemic crisis, is that companies that incorporate more technology on their business models are the most competitive and resilient to adverse conditions. Startups play a particular role on this context, not only because they are typically digital natives, but because they have on average higher skilled human resources. So if we want to promote a transition for a new model of economy, we need the involvement of the startups, since they are the newborn companies that are able to compete and to innovate. Portugal is for many years a strong supporter of this community. We have the Web Summit, and we will have it until 2028, and we have a great number of startups, a good network of incubators and accelerators, and a good network of investors that make of Portugal a true startup nation. But we want more. That is why, with the support of the Portuguese government and the European Commission, we will also have the new permanent structure for startups. This is a European initiative that will make of Portugal the European capital of entrepreneurship. And we have recently approved, during our presidency of the European Council, a new framework about startup nation standards that includes specific commitments on stock options taxation in order to facilitate and attract more investment to Europe. We need a stronger cluster of companies that are fully dedicated and focused on cybersecurity. In my last intervention, in the last edition of C-Days, I have urged the large number of companies operating in Portugal in the area of cybersecurity to raise the bar and to create the grounds for a strong association that truly represents this important sector. We need to be stronger and to get a greater scale. And this means working together, not only nationally but internationally. We need to understand that our competitors are not our neighbors. Our competitors are much further in other continents. We count on you to make a difference. Thank you very much.
And we're back. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary of State. Very, very wise words around why it matters and how to create the bonds and the strong links that we need. We all have to chip in together. And to keep with our welcoming words, I want to welcome someone very special because it's part of the family, it's part of what makes this the real thing. So please, I want to welcome for some welcoming words our next guest, Mr. Luigi Rebuffi, who is our Secretary General for the European Cybersecurity Organization. Luigi, buonasera.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. A lot of things have already been said that I was planning to say. So thanks to the Portal partners which are co-organizing this 9th edition. Our trusted members S21 SEX, and IAM, Maxiv, and local partners as the National Cybersecurity Centre of Portugal, the Scale Up Portal, and Bright Pixel. But of course, also thanks to the kind words of the André Dergao Azevedo, the Portuguese Secretary of State for the Digital Transition, which just stressed the point that working together, is the key message, is the way to move forward for this, for the recovery from the pandemic and for the supporting the protection of the digital transition. Competitors, he said, are coming from outside. In a sense, yes, but also we have to consider that we have all to work together because we cannot do everything in Europe. So we have to cooperate with the global cybersecurity and digital ecosystem. But first of all, we have to support and strengthen what Europe, with the competence that Europe has. And for doing this, we need more resources and more investment. This 9th edition is following, as been reminded at the beginning, the first previous seminar that we had in Tallinn, 2017. It looks like very long ago when I remember we had the first meeting, then in Paris, in Milan, in Berlin, in Madrid, in Luxembourg, and then the 2 digital connection due to the COVID in Brussels and in Bochum. So now we are very proud to move forward to Porto. We would have liked to be there, but unfortunately this is not the case. But we are very happy to be here in the context of the C Days organized by the National Cybersecurity Center of Portugal and part of the program of the Portuguese presidency of the European Council. ECSO has supported for 5 years the public-private partnership with the Commission and the development of a resilient, competitive European ecosystem for cybersecurity. But beyond this buzzword, the reality is that we have federated the European stakeholders in a wide community that is growing stronger and stronger, also because of the increased need for the digital transition and the unexpected push from the pandemic. And moving forward in this direction and coherent with the new European regulation on the competence center, which is supported by the European Commission and the member states, we are now looking at federating the different national cybersecurity communities. Portugal and either country will have a national coordination center on cybersecurity, but we want also to develop what we call transversal communities across countries, like the SMEs and the startups, like the regions, but now also the investors, which are working closely to the regional ecosystem as well. And it's not only about developing the community with common interests and policies, but also to move together towards some concrete action. Over the last months, ECSO investor community has put forward the proposal for a fund of 1 billion euro, public and private money. And this initiative will equip Europe with concrete tools to strengthen its investment activities and strengthen the control over European competence in the cybersecurity domain. The time to make crucial choices is fast approaching with this digital transformation speeding up and the need for a sustainable recovery. We need to update our priorities, and to implement them, it is urgent to act collectively at European level. So for this reason, we have organized also this workshop, and after this introductory speech, we will have a couple of very interesting keynotes on risks and the current set of investments, which will be followed by a panel where we have gathered distinguished speakers from different perspectives to discuss what to be the cost for Europe in case of inaction. What would happen if we don't move together? What will happen if we don't have enough resources? What will happen if we don't do it fast enough? So for this workshop, we have more than 250 registered participants covering the entire investment chain and decision makers from the Commission services, without considering that there's also a Zoom streaming for which we don't know how many people will follow. So now I thank you for your participation, for your attention, and I really wish a good luck to the keynote speakers and the panelists, and we will meet again for the closing of this workshop. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raboufi. It's an absolute pleasure having you here with us, and very wise words. I would just add something that probably a lot of people don't know, but Mr. Raboufi has been involved in building this infrastructure to bring everyone together around security for many, many years. a couple of decades at least. So that is very impressive. Not a lot of people are there pushing every day to make this a reality. So those words are very important. And it's very great news that we are thinking about a fund of funds of 1 billion euros, because that's definitely going to supercharge the scene in Europe. And precisely to talk about these things, I want to introduce our next panel, where we're going to talk, as we were saying a moment ago, keynote, where we're going to talk about the peril of the decade. We're going to be talking, or our guest is going to be talking about global cyber risk, the economic impact, and the responses to this. And what are the implications of the rise of the international cyber competition? And to talk about that, we have an incredible guest with an extraordinary track record. He started many years ago in a telco company like Vodafone, when it wasn't called like that, working and running the information security and as a risk manager. From there, he eventually headed the cybersecurity business at Netas. But in between and back, he ended up working with Deloitte in many different positions, mostly related with cyber risk services, ending up being the director of cybersecurity services for Deloitte. Nowadays, he heads the Cyber Services and Innovation Department at Munich Re. So I really am very happy to welcome our next speaker. So please, virtual applause for Ali Kumsu. Ali, welcome here.
Hello, Alex. Thank you for your warm and kind words. I'm humbled. Dear participants of the 9th Cyber Investor Days, good afternoon, or good morning and good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. I have the privilege to address you as one of the keynote speakers today. I'm joining the workshop from the beautiful city of Munich, Germany. The football fans among us would know that we will be hosting the game between Germany and France for Euro 2020 this evening, an event long overdue. As Alex stated, I work for Munich Re, the global leader in reinsurance and market leader in cyber reinsurance since practically the inception of the market. I have witnessed the evolution of what is now called cyber for the last 2 decades. Today, I would like to provide my perspective on the economic impact of cyber events from the lens of a global reinsurer and what we're doing at Munich Re and broader cyber insurance industry to play our part. So, 2.4 million. That is the number of Instagram followers of Ramon Abbas, also known as Ray Hushpuppi, now held in USA, waiting to be tried for money laundering charges, moving serious money for cybercrime. When he was captured, this time last year, officials found 13 luxury vehicles and a cash worth of $40 million stashed. I have chosen not to show his pictures with luxury cars, to not enrich him further with copyright claims. But the curious among you can look, as his account is still present with that many followers on Instagram. Bottom line is, cybercrime is very profitable. It is also very organized. It has become such a profitable enterprise that it attracts talented individuals, recruits them like we recruit to our companies, and promise lavish lifestyles, supposedly with little risk of retribution. They flourish partly because the crime can be committed remotely, supported by a complex ecosystem by the likes of Ray, and partly because certain countries close an eye and even harbor those cyber criminals, and partly because cryptocurrencies allow cheap anonymity. It is also devastating to those affected by these crimes. Cancer patients of a hospital in Vermont had to delay taking their treatment as ransomware brought operations to a halt. Cybercrime is as old as cyber itself, but the amount of attention it commands is unprecedented. It has reached a level that is not tolerable anymore and has become a threat to the economies and, even more importantly, to human lives. So recent and steep rise in ransomware attacks are the continuation of a steady increase in cybercrime accelerated by the global pandemic. Cyber criminals have discovered more effective ways to make money, and with success became even more aggressive. They're selective in targeting. scatter type attacks and collateral damage still exist, but devastating campaigns happen not to be coincidental. Now let's take a look at the economic impact of cyber events from the lens of cyber insurance. Before we do that, I believe cyber insurance has proven that it plays an important role in the cyber resilience of our economies. It helps companies make better decisions by providing economic incentives to do so, assists when incidents happen and even before, and finally provides financial relief when most needed. As I will show next, global demand confirms this thesis. Cyber insurance market was almost $5 billion in 2018 globally and projected to grow to 20 billion in 2025. Year-over-year growth has been consistent around 21%. Europe's share in the global market has grown from 10% in 2017 to 15% last year and is expected to grow to 25% in 2025. Growth rate of premiums in Europe is close to 38%, almost double the rate of global averages. Share of North America, in comparison, in global premiums stands at around 75% in 2020 and is projected to be 60% in 2025. As you can tell, Europe is closing the gap with North America in penetration of cyber insurance. Let's compare these figures to the cybersecurity spend of North America to Europe. Gartner estimates that of the $50 billion spent yearly on cybersecurity technology in 2020, North America accounted for 55% and Europe for 25%. More, Europe is growing slightly slower than North America when it comes to security technology spend, and as such is not projected to close the gap. Even accounting for a difference of 40% in gross domestic product, relative spend in North America is still multiples of Europe. And this is true for security technology spend as well as cyber insurance. European economies hence offer very attractive targets for cybercrime. There are very valuable companies and institutions, and as these figures show, they may not be as protected as their North American counterparts on average. Of course, security spend on technology and insurance is only part of the equation. Good corporate governance, availability of skilled professionals, and a strong solution ecosystem play a big role in effective defenses. But for the sake of argument, we can take security spend as a proxy for cybersecurity posture. So what do we observe in losses and trends? COVID-19 had an adverse effect on the cyber risk landscape by accelerating existing trends. Attack vectors have shifted. Unexploited vulnerabilities caused by working from home trend, catching most enterprises off guard. With budgets under pressure and attack surface bigger by accelerated digitalization, cyber criminals simply had more chances of success. Historically, US cyber insurance demand was mainly driven with interest in data breach covers, a typical third-party cover. Europe has trailed far behind US in interest to data breach covers. Smaller fines in Europe and less stringent reporting requirements, coupled with differing implementations of GDPR in each European country, had historically subdued interest at data breach covers in Europe compared to US, but this trend is reversing. With rise of ransomware and supply chain attacks, companies are increasingly wary of business interruption at both sides of the Atlantic. Demand on first-party covers, like business interruption, is increasing across the board. In return, the nature of ransomware attacks and resulting business interruption costs have let first-party claims increase significantly faster than third-party claims in US and in Europe. We have experienced a rise in both frequency and severity of attacks. this has put pressure on the profitability of cyber carriers, and prices have increased in 2020 as a result. There's no obvious reason why the trend in cyber attacks should change anytime soon, urging both governments and companies to start implementing new solutions. So what does systemic cyber risk look like in terms of potential scenarios and scale of losses? How worried should we be as a society for the risk to our economies? And to what extent will the cyber insurance market respond to this risk? I want to share with you a snapshot from the result of a working group in Pan-European Insurance Forum on systemic cyber risks, where Munich Re was a contributor. We've looked at extreme scenarios for which loss estimates were already publicly available in research publications, for example, from Lloyd's of London and Cambridge University. There are, of course, other scenarios possible, which are also concerning, but for which we don't have loss estimates publicly available, for example, an attack against internet infrastructure leading to a widespread internet outage. Some loss scenarios are deemed insurable, for example, a widespread malware event or an outage of a major cloud service provider. And the cyber insurance market will respond, but only for a minority of the overall economic losses due to currently low levels of cyber insurance penetration. In other more extreme scenarios, such as an outage of a critical infrastructure component or escalation of nation-state cyber operations, repeated retaliatory cyber attacks, the cyber market has no appetite to cover the losses due to the vast accumulation potential and significant uncertainty and accurately modeling the loss. Takeaway is that for insured loss scenarios in Europe, economic losses are estimated between 94 billion and 120 billion US dollars in 2020, and is projected to grow up to 180 billion in 2025. If you compare those to insured losses, remember those are not the same. Not every loss category can and will be insured. The industry could in theory cover up to 60 billion US dollars of losses in 2025. Clearly, the cyber insurance industry can play a pivotal role, as the ratio of insured losses can dramatically increase compared to economic losses. However, this depends on the risk appetite of insurers, available capital, and adoption of cyber insurance as a solution. For such a capacity to exist in 2025, we need innovative solutions to better understand cyber risk and systemic effects, as well as better cyber hygiene and ways of accurately measuring it. Our own innovation activities are also clustered around these challenges, and I want to show you a glimpse of what we do. We have a lot of skin in the game and are investing consistently to improve our understanding of cyber risk. In the process, we're helping our customers get better in risk management, make better investment decisions, and embrace new technologies to be better protected. Specifically, we're investing in risk quantification, scoring, and rating solutions to not only improve our underwriting performance, but also offer these as solutions and help create de facto industry standards which are much needed. Recently, we have launched the first insurance product of its kind in partnership with Google Cloud and Allianz. We offer Google Cloud customers a seamless cyber insurance buying experience by utilizing information obtained directly from Google Cloud about the security posture of the customer. At the same time, we invest in cloud risk modeling activities together with major cloud providers to further our understanding of accumulation risks by the adoption of cloud technologies. We're also interested in continuous risk monitoring and risk intelligence solutions for mid-sized companies, as we recognize that they require the same tools available to large and sophisticated enterprises, but lack resources to make best use of them. Another area we invest is to help companies embrace new technologies like artificial intelligence. We have developed a special insurance product, AI Sure, to offer performance guarantees to algorithms that power new generation of solutions, like from CPO Systems and Deep Instinct, both innovative cyber companies tackling ROC hardware detection and endpoint protection, respectively. We will continue to observe strong demand for cybersecurity and cyber insurance. So it is not a one-off or fueled by pandemic type event. As the economic losses related to cyber events increases, companies will act more decisively to protect themselves. And as we discussed, the global pandemic has accelerated the growth of digital business models. In many parts of Europe, traditional industries are trying to pay high technological debt and catch up with oncoming disruption. We expect this to be the major driver for cybersecurity investments in Europe. Rollout of 5G, connecting billions of new devices to the internet, will create new opportunities, but also new challenges for cybersecurity. Cloud and edge computing, artificial intelligence, confidential computing are all new technologies that will change the risk landscape significantly. Supply chain attacks like SolarWinds have highlighted again that our economies and systems are hyper-connected. Ensuring the security of supply chains is a very hard problem for technical and political reasons. And economic incentives are not aligned well between producers and consumers of technology. And this only exacerbates the problem. As we have heard most recently in the G7 meeting in Cornwall, world leaders are preparing for more decisive action against cybercrime. This may be in applying more political pressure to countries that harbor cybercriminals, making cryptocurrencies less attractive to utilize as anonymous payment methods, enforcing better hygiene requirements, or more international cooperation in law enforcement. Fact is, the cost of non-compliance will also grow as more countries and industries set stricter standards and start to enforce them more rigorously. And finally, the expectations of board of management and senior management have changed. Boards scrutinize the cybersecurity posture of their own companies like never before. They want to understand whether current investments are enough or well-directed and how they compare with other companies. Most importantly, they want to be reported about cyber risk like market or credit risk in quantified financial terms. This drives significant investment in startups and solutions that utilize data to quantify financial impact of cyber risk scenarios and become essential tools in cyber risk management. I think there are signs of hope that the COVID-19 pandemic may be overcome. A universal vaccine to safeguard digital operations, however, will never be in place. We need to continue to stay vigilant and invest in safeguarding our increasingly digital lives. Thank you for listening, and happy to take your questions after the panel discussion. I hand it over to you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Ali. That was fantastic. I was thinking, like, you're the guy with the doom and gloom, and so all this stuff is happening. And you even started scratching the surface of all the new things that have happened since I last talked to you till today that keep raining on us. But it was a fantastic talk. I think it's a very powerful warning signal that we need to do things. And for those of you listening to us right now in the live feed, please, Ali will be answering questions, not just right now, because he's going to be with us in a panel in a moment. But meanwhile, you can write down any questions you have for Ali on the YouTube channel, on the comment section, and our team will make sure that we forward those questions for Ali. And without further ado, I want to welcome our next panelist, which I'm personally a big fan because he's had an extended trajectory, probably one of the biggest corporations in Portugal, one that I'm very fond of because they've done very, very good thing, which is called Sonai. And he's had an extended career there all the way till becoming right now the managing director of Sonai IM, so the investment management branch, the tech investment arm of Sonai. And among many other things, he's board members of two of the startups that we mentioned before, including Bright Pixel and S21 Sec, which, by the way, I'll tell him later my stories, because I was there when S21 was founded. So interesting conversation we can have one day with a beer in person. And among the other things he's done, he's been very active, and he's contributed actively with ECSO to build the investment community around cybersecurity. And precisely because of that, he has an extraordinary perspective on what is the current status on the private investment in the cybersecurity field. So without further ado, please welcome our next guest. Big virtual applaud for Carlos Alberto Silva. Carlos, welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the kind words. I hope not to disappoint you when we meet in person. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending. If anything, especially after this, the last keynote, we all agree that cybersecurity is absolutely critical to help the companies throughout the digital transformation journey. So it's a fundamental pillar in that. I'm here to share with you not only the several actions and initiatives that we've been putting in place in the last few years around cybersecurity and the ecosystem, but more importantly, I would like to voice here a call to action, to much more action that we need, because Europe definitely needs to leverage the assets we have, the investments we've done so far, the full potential we have, and the pan-European scale. So now I need to, all right. So when we think about the market, the cybersecurity, the main takeaways are that we are talking about a very sizable market. So close to the, sorry guys, okay. Sorry for that. We are talking about a very sizable market, close to the $200 million per year. Growing at a fast pace, so double-digit growth. And we can see today companies allocating a bigger stake of their IT budgets to cybersecurity spending. When we look at the spending on a global perspective, we see that the US accounts for more or less 40% of this global stake, this global market, and Europe stays below the 15% mark, which in relative terms, of course, means that we are underspending versus the US, for example. Another important data point is, of course, the money invested in startups. This is a key data point that we closely follow. It's close now to the 8 billion mark, and it's resulting on several unicorns. Last year was particularly active, but as a sign of the increasing trend, growing trend in this market, the first quarter this year has already seen more unicorns than the entire 2020 last year. So if we look at the cybersecurity ecosystem as a value chain, when we go to the fundamentals, to the raw materials, let's say like that, we can see that in Europe, for example, in terms of number of developers, we are actually above the US, and with a more pronounced trend, growth trend compared to the US. When we look at the relevant R&D metrics, the produced papers, the references, the relevance of those papers, we are also comparing very well versus the US. And here, if we look at the innovation initiatives spread across Europe in several regions, we also, we also see a lot of activity. But in contrast, when we look at the market, the competitive landscape of the companies that we are creating, what we see is a very fragmented market and lacking scale. So we don't have a sufficient number of large companies in cybersecurity. Here, this is just a proxy, but we have here listed companies 100% dedicated to cybersecurity in Europe versus the US, and we have this difference from 3 to more than 50. And this gap is actually widening because as we speak, there are several companies lining up to IPO in the US in cybersecurity. So if moving to the next stage of the supply chain, when we look at the investors, the specialized investors in cybersecurity in Europe, we see just a handful of them. It's true that this number is growing, but it's also true that most of these investors on one side are relatively small, and on the other side, they are mostly focused on their local regions. And this is a huge contrast versus what we see, for example, in Israel and what we see in the US. And here, a word just to say that the relevance of specialized cybersecurity investors. If there's a word to describe the cybersecurity ecosystem, I would choose overwhelming, because we have more than 4,000 startups, from startups to large platforms, spread across dozens and dozens of segments, and in continuous motion, because there's every year there's the emergence of new spaces, and you really need to be expert to be able to navigate all this complexity, to invest in the right companies, and then to be able to help those companies to succeed against their competitors. So next slide. Okay, sorry. There's a delay here, sorry for that. When we break down, so if you think about the 8 billion number that I've shared before in terms of VC investment per year in startups, when we do the breakdown and we put US side by side Europe and even Israel, we see that Europe versus US, there's a factor of 18 times more investing in the US versus Europe. And this is a dramatic difference. Europe actually invests less than Israel, and Israel has only 8 million inhabitants. Of course, they are heavily sponsored by US as well, but still is a huge gap. And then if you look at this 8 billion spread across the several maturity stages of the startups or the financing rounds, what we see is the gap widens. Even though in seed we are more or less okay in Europe, the gap widens when we move to later stages, from Series A onwards. And this is really dramatic in a sense, because we put money in the companies for them to develop a product, but then somehow we fail them when they need to expand and compete more globally. So what happens to the companies born in Europe that are successful? So what's their destiny? Okay, so what happens is, and we have several examples, these companies are not being able to become a platform on their own, to become a multi-billion-dollar company on their own. What happens is they become very, very interesting, but they end up being acquired, and mostly by US large platforms. This is what's happening and what's been happening in the last few years in Europe. So, and this happens not because we are not doing things. We have several initiatives in place. And here we can see a short summary of these initiatives, and they go from very ambitious programs that go from the investment programs at the R&D stages and at the acceleration stages, to the support of a network of digital innovation hubs specialized in cybersecurity. ECSO, this investor days, that this 9th edition is also a very relevant initiative that we've launched, targeting more growth stage companies, and we are proud to say that these events have been increasing in importance. The number of companies attending, the number of investors also attending, and this matchmaking is already producing and helping companies to raise money. But definitely this is not enough. The clear reading from our perspective is that Europe is really punching below its weight. We know how critical digital transformation is. We know that digital transformation means everything is becoming digital across all verticals. This means, of course, an exponential increase in the attack surface. And that means technology, cybersecurity solutions to protect companies in this journey. And of course, there's also the digital sovereignty concern, because more nation states look at cybersecurity as a key defensive competence or key offensive, depending on your perspective. And so we came up with this claim. Sorry, next slide, please. We think there is time, and it's very urgent actually, to strengthen the cybersecurity ecosystem. So Europe has the R&D capacity, has a very significant and quality talent pool, has the pan-European scale when we look at Europe as a combined entity, but we are lagging in the investment chain front. So we believe, next slide please. We believe that Europe needs to create a dedicated pan-European cybersecurity focused funding platform. So Europe, previous slide, sorry. I'm sure this is not a virus, but okay. So Europe needs to provide startups conditions to become platforms on their own. So the companies born in Europe need to be able to have the ambition to compete globally as large platforms. And we know that the cybersecurity market is something will only grow and grow significantly. But again, it's a very complex ecosystem, requires expert support from the investors putting money on these companies. There's also one of the key aspects here in Europe, there's a lot of money to invest. So we all hear that there's a lot of liquidity in the markets, but the reality is that European investors still refrain a bit from investing in tech, given the complexity. And if you think that cybersecurity, of course, being a subset of the tech space and particularly complex, we need to somehow make these investors attracted by the thesis. And the other thing is, there are also relevant and large investors willing to put money in Europe, but again, the kind of size of the funds we have in Europe specialized in cybersecurity are very small, so not eligible for the screening process. And the other thing, the other concerning point is that this is definitely a global market. So we cannot afford to stay with this very fragmented market, build with small companies scattered across Europe, because in the end, they will compete with large companies coming from the other side of the pond, very well financed, and with their expansion plans to cover Europe, of course, and they will outcompete these local players. So I think the key aspect here is that we need to ensure that the European startups will be able to compete at the level playing field versus the exact same technologies that are appearing both in Israel and in the US. So next slide, please. So this is the initiative. As a result of this, we believe that to bridge the gap that we currently see in the market, we need this instrument. Previous slide, please. We need this instrument, as Luigi mentioned before. So it's 1 billion fund of funds to be deployed in the next 5 years. Of course, further investigation is needed, both on the financial and governance scheme to put this instrument in place. But we highlighted here the main objectives to be fulfilled with this initiative. So one, we need to stimulate the emergence of pan-European cybersecurity specialized funds and GPs, as well as strengthen the existing ones, of course. We need to focus on Series A onwards, because it's when the companies have a product, they need to expand, and they need to go abroad, and they need to compete on a more global scale. They need specialized support. We need to leverage this 1 billion with private money that is out there, but needs, of course, to be aware of this opportunity that, by the way, is producing huge returns for the investors, both in the US and in Israel. And we believe that a dedicated pan-European investment support program needs also to be put in place to complement this instrument. And of course, we need to leverage and complement all the investments and initiatives we have both at R&D and acceleration levels. So next slide. It was precisely with this request that ECSO sent to the European Commission a letter of intent, so asking political support for this, so presenting this scenario and this diagnosis, and presenting this proposal as a solution, a key solution to allow us to catch up versus US and versus Israel. We are very happy to say that we started with 8 sponsors. We have now 50, and we are not talking only about investors, but we are talking about cybersecurity stakeholders in general. And this is in motion, and I'm sure we will have more news on this along this conference. So next slide, just to conclude. The final takeaways that I would like you guys to bear in mind is that Europe has a saying, because we have the right assets in terms of R&D, we have a sufficient critical mass in terms of number of developers, we have the scale. We currently also have a very fragmented market made of small local companies, and we need to overcome this difficulty. And the way to do it, we believe, is through the creation of this instrument. So if you believe in this vision, to everyone that is attending, of course, we more than welcome your support to the letter of intent, and you can do it at any time with ECSO. We will be very happy to count with you on board. And on my end, that's pretty much it. I'll be happy to take your questions later. And for now, so enjoy the conference. Good luck to all the startups applying, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. It was a pleasure having you, and very good news also from 8 to 50 people signing the letter of intent. So that's fantastic. I'm pretty sure you're going to end up with more by the end of this event, as you said. I sincerely hope.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving on to the panel of this afternoon, and it's going to be pretty heated. I mean, the title itself is quite interesting. It's what if the Europe is not doing enough to develop an attractive ecosystem for cybersecurity investments? And that's a very good question, very big one, pretty complex to answer. But to moderate the panel that we're going to have in a second, I want to welcome the moderator who she has a stellar track record. I'm very impressed. First of all, maybe highlight the fact that she's a woman in the cybersecurity space, which is rare. And it's incredible that we have it, and we need more. I keep always insisting during these talks that we need more women, more heterogeneity in this kind of fields, because it brings a lot of insight. So her trajectory, stellar, technical background. She ended up being senior op risk and ISO officer at the European Stability Mechanism, which, by the way, kind of hands out up to 500 billion euros for the stability of Europe. which is a pretty big deal. And currently, she's a senior head of CISO and Op Risk at the European Investment Bank. So please welcome our moderator. Big virtual applause for our panel and moderator, Jelena Matone. Jelena, pleasure having you.
Thank you so much. What a great introduction. And thank you very much for this. Quite flattered when I hear this about myself. Sometimes I feel like an alien when we say it's a woman in cybersecurity, but it's true. We need more women, and I really do invite more women to come. But as you've given such a great introduction about me, I think I also, there are a lot of great panelists here that I need to introduce as well. We have with us Ali Kumsu, Head of Cyber Innovation and Services at Munich Re, global market leader in cyber reinsurance. And his mission at Munich Re is bridging the cybersecurity world and insurance industry by managing cybersecurity investments and building new cyber business and products. Ali is also a cybersecurity industry professional, having served in various roles over the last 2 decades before joining Munich Re. And he's a graduate of Purdue University, USA, with a Master's of Science degree, somebody who comes also from North America as myself, in computer science. And he's married, father to a daughter, and a slave to a young cat, and lives in Munich, Germany. And definitely when he's not thinking about cyber, which I suppose is 23 hours a day, he loves to sail. Then I'd like to also introduce Judith. Judith Munsek has served as a cybersecurity officer for Siemens Energy since October 2019, and she's responsible for securing Siemens Energy's business operations, products, data, and assets, and for ensuring compliance with cybersecurity regulations. She serves as a thought leader on a cybersecurity and an advisor to Siemens Energy senior leadership on cybersecurity risks related to product, services, and operations. And in her current professional role, she's working to build Siemens Energy Future's global cybersecurity capabilities in information security operations, supply chain, security management, and products and solution security services. Then we have Mario Beccia. Mr. Mario Beccia is the head of strategic support branch at NATO's office at the CIO, and holds a university degree in economics and management, an MBA in management of innovation, and several certifications in cybersecurity and information technology. And he started his career in 1987 by joining a startup company focused on the use of web technologies for businesses. He then worked as independent consultant in an IT information assurance products in Italy and Belgium. And he joined NATO Allied Command Transformation in 2006, where he worked on business transformation and capability development programs. He supported a setup of the NATO computer incident response capability and IT modernization programs by collecting engineering requirements, championing the creation of implementation roadmap for cloud computing and cyber defense in NATO, working with various entities in the organization. We also have Carlos Alberto Silvas, who is a managing director of Sonae IM, investing in cybersecurity and digital infrastructure for more than 10 years across Europe. And we just heard him talking, and I think it was a great introduction to our panel. So thank you, Carlos, for bringing up the topics on such things. We also have Philippe Aman, who is the head of strategy at the European Cybercrime Center and oversees delivery of strategic and tactical cybersecurity and cybercrime related products, such as Europol's Internet Organized Crime Threat Assessment. And other key areas of responsibility for Philip include the assessment of current and future technology trends, managing EC3's industries advisory groups and academic advisory network, prevention and awareness and capacity building. And then we have Simon Church, CEO of Maxis Cybersecurity with over 30 years of experience in the fields of technology, cybersecurity investment globally. Simon is considered an expert in his field, and he has held leadership positions considered in companies such as NTT Security, Vodafone, Enterprise Security Services, OPTVI, VeriSign, and NetIQ. And he's also sitting as an advisory board at Glassfall and Persephone. He has over the years mentored many cybersecurity companies and teams on their international go-to-market strategy, advised private equity and venture capital businesses, and is a mentor for UK-based incubator Cylon. So now that you see that there are many great panelists here, I would like to also ask our panelists and invite them to give a short and strategic statement to all of our audience that are listening to us. So please, perhaps we would go first with Judith. I invite Judith first to go ahead.
Yeah, hi Jelena. I hope everybody can hear me quite good around the globe, or especially in Europe. I'm happy to be here. Strategic statement from my point of view, here representing a global enterprise working in an engineering sector, but with a strong cyber focus for its own products. Cybersecurity is a two-folded problem, or two sides of the medal. So cybersecurity is everyone's daily responsibility for each of us, for private citizens, for solution providers, for SMEs, for every government, and a mandatory purpose to stabilize and secure our societies. So we heard this already in the introduction, but on the other side, and for me as a supplier in the energy supply chain, cybersecurity is also a competitive parameter in every business, and that must be strategically anchored. And to be honest, at a first glance, that might be a little clash, but to be honest, we talked about ecosystems already. We will talk about sharing innovations, about investing in a much bigger way than we do it currently in Europe. And versus a USP I need in my supply chains and for my customers. And to be honest, it's our task to bring these two sides of the medal together. Thanks, Jelena.
Thank you, Judith, very much. So perhaps I call Mario Beccia.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I think we have some sort of issues with my video, unfortunately. Can you hear me now? Okay. Okay, fantastic. Yes, so thank you very much for having me today, this afternoon with you. And well, as Jelena anticipated, we have a number of interesting issues going on now, and the creation of the Office of the CIO is going into the direction of providing more coherence and a more effective and efficient approach to managing a number of issues, including cybersecurity. NATO will go through a major cyber adaptation program in the next years to make it even more efficient, to make its security measures even more efficient and effective than what they are today. Just acknowledging the increase in the security environment and the increase of cyber threats and issues, as we heard from the keynotes before. Well, there are several other things that are happening that are very interesting for us. So, for instance, from my previous life in the EU, I can say that there are at least two tools that the EU is adopting, which are going to be very interesting for us. One is the EU Strategic Compass, which is going to set out the strategy for defense in the EU in the next years, which contains a number of indications and recommendations for cyber defense and cyber security. And obviously the permanent and structural cooperation, which is a very interesting tool to create European cooperative projects. And not surprisingly, one of the most important of these projects started in the first wave is exactly on cybersecurity. Finally, well, we all know that yesterday there was the NATO summit here in Brussels, and in the final declaration you will find out an even augmented emphasis on the fact that the alliance has to strengthen its cybersecurity measures and its cybersecurity approach. So, and on top of that, another thing that I will mention is in the final communique, there is also a renewed emphasis on the importance of strengthening and stimulating innovation in Europe and throughout the alliance that goes towards even more towards the direction that we were describing. So it's a very interesting time, and we are very happy to be part of it. Back to you, Jelena.
Thank you, Mario, very much. Ali, I invite you now perhaps to say a few words.
Sure, Jelena, thank you. I think cybercrime is like water, right? It follows the path of least resistance. So our responsibility is to clear ourselves and our customers out of that path. We have heard today that Europe needs to catch up with US in having one of the key components of effective cyber hygiene, a healthy and broad cybersecurity ecosystem consisting of large corporations, academia, institutions, and of course the startups themselves. I think as a European company headquartered in Germany, I can see and have first-hand experience, our companies here will immensely profit from having a closer dialogue with innovative startups that target their needs. Technology is global, but as we're developing that technology and gaining a competitive advantage, as Judith said, I think it matters where that technology is being developed.
Thank you very much. Simon, I invite you now.
Thank you very much. Possibly the only person on the panel that's representing the supply side, although I have dabbled in the delivery side through my career. I think the thing to remember is well, the IT marketplace and cybersecurity talks a lot about technology. Technology is not the panacea. I'm a very firm advocate, and I'm sure many of my people on the panel would agree with me. This is about process, people, and then technology. And it's about getting these things right. And I think Carlos touched on an interesting point in the fact that we've got a lot of capability in Europe. We've got a lot of experience in Europe, both on the supply side and the delivery side. But unfortunately, a lot of that expertise ends up working from the supply side in predominantly US and possibly Israeli organizations, sometimes Asia-Pacific organizations. If you look specifically around the services side, we've got an amazing services sector that covers everything from SMEs all the way up to large enterprises covering cybersecurity services. Now, those companies may well be US-based. A lot of them are European-based. They might be subsets of organizations, of large organizations, of carriers, of consulting companies, but there's a lot of capabilities there. And I think I really like to explore the question that was raised earlier, I'm sure with some of the panelists that we have here, around sovereignty and what does sovereignty really mean? And especially with the NATO conversations that went on yesterday and obviously G7 conversations. Sovereignty in terms of cybersecurity assuredness for the whole of the European community isn't just about technology, it's about the people and the processes and the way in which we interact with each other. And I think the other side is, it is not a one-size-fits-all model. What you do for the large enterprise is very, very, very different to what you do to the small enterprise and the individual, and the ways in which we partner with different parts of that ecosystem to deliver those services. Back to you.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Philip. Philip, I guess we cannot hear you.
Here we go. Can you hear me now? Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor. My apologies for joining late. I feel like I've missed out on some two very interesting presentations, but it was good to be last now after the joint statements. I think from a strategic point of view, I don't want to take up too much time. I think one of the things, just like Simon said, I'm pretty unique in the sense that I'm presenting the law enforcement angle, if you will, the combating cybercrime angle, which has a strong innovation dimension as well. But so one of the things I would say is, from a strategic point of view, I think we need to have, this networked approach. Like Judith said, it's a joint responsibility. Cybersecurity should not be seen separate from combating cybercrime. I mean, that's a big battle that we fight, at policy and political level to see, we want to be an equal partner at the table. And we have some successes, for instance, with Mario, our joint MOU with ENISA, EDA, European Defense Agency, and CERT-EU. I think that was certainly a step into the right direction to have, the right partners at the table. I think from what we heard, the industry perspective is hugely important. I mean, industries, the innovative part, they produce, they develop, they put things on the market. Very often, however, not with security and privacy by design in mind, which is one of the things that I think we should be looking at. And usually, we're also not involved in that process, so we usually only learn afterwards. What kind of innovative ways criminals find to use that new technology, that new product. Which again, we need to come in as law enforcement as well. I think what we see is, we have crime as a service, we have things like ransomware as a service, we have an underground industry that sort of tries to exploit what the surface industry, if you will, produces, and they provide the services and tools to use those technologies to commit cyber crime. That in turn lowers the entry barrier for a lot of criminals to commit cyber crime. So that's a huge problem. And I don't have to tell anyone here how critical ransomware is, which now goes way beyond the financial impact. And we've been saying this for years. I'm sure you've been saying this for years. It is a risk to critical infrastructure. And I think the latest examples have clearly shown that, even though I'm surprised that the red line was not the healthcare sector, but bacon and oil basically obviously did the trick. So now we have the political attention, President Biden mentioning ransomware, G7 statement mentioning ransomware, ransomware task force, World Economic Forum looking at it, and we're working with them to solve that problem. And if we do work together, I can mention many examples, but I think EMOTET in January, where we hosted the coordination center at Europol, I think is a clear example of what we can do when we work together and actually go after the root cause of the problem and have a lasting impact in terms of security. And in 2018, about 61% of all emails with a malicious attachment were sent through the EMOTET network. That is down now for good. So I think, we come together with industry, with other law enforcement partner internationally, we have that huge impact. But I would call this, the gold standard. Silver standard is the information position. We all share, we provide that common picture on the current, landscape, what is coming, in the future. Gold standard is, joint operations, but the platinum standard is actually prevention and awareness and preventing those things from happening in the first place. And again, I think that's where we need to come together. And, to summarize this, I think we all hold parts of the puzzle and we need to put these parts together to be successful. Industry can't do it on its own. Law enforcement can't do it on its own. Academia can't do it on its own. The CSIRT community can't do that. We need to come together. And that would be my plea to you. Thank you. Back to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip. And I really, really love the statement of coming together. And I think every time we have these conferences is one of the beautiful things where we exchange ideas and we continue working together even behind the scenes. And we cannot do it alone. Thank you all for your introduction statements. Now I would like to ask perhaps any one of you, whoever would like to answer, do you recognize the aforementioned situation in Europe or agree with the analysis proposed by the ECSO was still immature European ecosystem? Whoever would like to go ahead, please.
I'll give that a go just as a follow-on from what Carlos was saying. I think we just need to qualify this. I don't think, I think we're immature is wrong with regards to technology. Technology, we have huge levels of innovation. We create fantastic innovation on the technology side of cybersecurity, and that unfortunately often gets exported through some form of acquisition vehicle to another state, so typically to the US. We have massive levels of capability within Europe in terms of cybersecurity skills across the whole piece. And I think we also have, I know we also have some incredibly good European cybersecurity services companies that are there as well. I think it's how you ensure that you get the right levels of investment and the right levels of expertise at the right time. So I think we need to be cautious about sweeping statements about, we're way behind the US and we're way behind the Israeli marketplace. We're not. In some respects, we are. And what you find is, I'm sure many of you have walked around the Bay Area in San Francisco on business trips or maybe personal trips as well. You find a huge amount of European accents. And if you look at the leadership and the innovators in many of those organizations, they all have European, or many of them have European accents. So we should be proud of that. What we do, though, need to do, exactly as Carlos Alberto said, is just get more mature on the investment side, whether that be private investment, whether that be state investment. And that's the key, I believe, in driving that further forwards.
Loved it. I'm really with you on this one. Who else would like to take this question? Anybody else?
Well, if I may, Elena, if I may add something, I support fully what has just been said. I think that from various angles, there are goods and bads as usual in any comparison. I mean, for instance, if we look at infrastructure, I mean, there are elements of the European infrastructure that probably would need some more attention. Other elements that are quite innovative themselves. There is also a huge discussion, for instance, in my previous position at the European Defence Agency, we had this on our agenda quite high. The topic of European strategic independence, strategic autonomy. Well, there can be no autonomy if part or the vast majority of your infrastructure is dependent on another country. But then when it comes to information technology, this gets more complicated because defining what your infrastructure is, well, it's not so easy, as we all know around the table. And so, for instance, one of the examples that we keep doing is how about cloud computing? We know that most of the cloud computing operators today are non-European. And it would be quite complicated. I mean, there has been several experiments in the last 10 years, and one is still ongoing, Project Gaia X, to create an operator, a cloud computer, a fully European cloud computing operator. Well, this is quite complicated on the one hand. On the other hand, I think that in the near future we will discover that maybe that's not the type of infrastructure that is strictly needed. I mean, there are layers on top that we can overlay, which will give us some level, if not full, strategic autonomy from that. So the more we go ahead and the more we realize that parts of the infrastructure become commoditized, and so it's not really strategically important anymore, but the importance is on the layers that come on top of it. And this is a discussion that has been going on for a while, and I think that most of the investments in innovation that we have been seeing and we will see in the mid to long term will try to focus on how to do this, and how to achieve this in this kind of different way from the past. When it comes to human resources, I mean, we were talking about people, process, and technology, and as it has been said, I mean, technology is only one of the pillars. Well, I mean, we don't need to go as far as to the Silicon Valley or realize that we have an incredible amount of talent in Europe. Incredible amounts. I mean, the things that we do and that we have seen in both the military and the civilian environment are just incredible. I think the real challenge is the fact that differently from other environments in Europe, all of this talent is concentrated in small or tiny entities, which struggle a lot in becoming relevant and in assuming a relevant position. This is a concept that has been going on for a while, and the EU and now even NATO with this new effort on defense investment. Well, I think that these institutions will have to invest even more in trying to lift up the capabilities and open new possibilities for this operator. Again, I don't think there is a strong need or a strong lack of skills. It's really about making it and letting it grow and establish a new level of understanding.
Maybe, Elena, I jump in on that because I fully agree with this, and I want to raise one word. Maybe it's also about mindset. So from a company perspective, you can go to a lot of conferences and talking about mindset, agile way of thinking, how do we leverage our supply chain, etc. It's no digitization, also not on a global or a pan-European level without cybersecurity. And what I see from a company's perspective, because I have to incorporate all these directives, regulations, NLFs, product standards, whatever, yeah, we are taking too less care of looking at our complete market and our potential we have also from an inter-company as well as from an inter-country state of view. So we are looking at regulations, we might look at our competitive factors, But really to raise this on a 10 years plan and to come to a mindset in Europe how to play this game, that's missing. And there are the others which were mentioned by you colleagues, US and Israel are much further. And that's starting also not in companies' point of view or in suppliers' point of view. It's really also starting with our own kids. Now also to say this from an education point of view. But there has to change a lot also in mindsets, how we do regulations and stepping away from regulation to incorporate cyber as a feature, not as a bug, to say so.
Loved it, Judith, loved it. And I always say we have to always remember that the people are the first line of defense, and we need more education in schools for this. And I see Philip has another thing to say, and I love this because I think we're all getting into the groove of what's missing and what we need. Philip.
Well, first of all, just to link to that, I think that's, we do a lot of prevention and awareness. And I think that part is that really resonates with me. I think just like we teach children how to, survive in the real world, we need to do the same thing, when it comes to cyberspace, when it comes to safety, security, but also, to go beyond that sort of swiping, a knowledge that currently a lot of young people seem to have, and really get into that innovative space as well. But I agree, it has to start very early. I think from my perspective, obviously it's a little bit unusual probably to talk about innovation, but we are in fact very innovative. I mean, there's the innovation hub at EU level that includes a lot of, the security relevant agencies such as ECSO or Frontex, but also Europol, and we have our own innovation lab. And we do look at, we look at quantum computing, quantum encryption. We did so already in 2015. We looked at artificial intelligence. We published a few months ago, I think, an interesting report together with Trend Micro and Unicre on the potential malicious uses and abuses of AI, just looking at, what's happening right now. What's the potential sort of negative side of AI in the future. But you turn this around and say, okay, knowing this, what can we do to produce and develop AI that is, unlocks the potential, the huge potential that this technology will bring. But I think when it comes to innovation, I think one of the challenges I see, at least at EU level, is that, balance between, Judith said it as well, regulation and, coming up with a framework, and at the same time not stifling innovation. And I think, if you look at the GDPR, I think that certainly looks like a success model. We've exported that to the world, our European way of dealing with privacy. Now we have obviously the proposal for AI, and some people said, well, it seems like the EU is more into regulating instead of innovating. I think that's not true, but I do see that challenge, to see how far do we go with, regulation and making sure that, we cover the potential abuse and dark side of technology versus at the same time really providing that platform for people to be innovative. But I think, Judith, and I'm not putting words into your mouth, but I think this idea of seeing privacy, security, and safety as a competitive advantage, and again, exporting that as part of our technology, I think that's a huge potential for the EU. I'll just leave it there because obviously other people can speak better on that topic. Thank you.
No, it was a great point, Philip. And as much as I also see GDPR being something that is challenging for us, there's also good points of GDPR for EU itself. And I also like the points that Mario, I never had a moment to say this, but I want to say also for cloud. Where do we use the cloud? For somebody who is in the EU institutions, we do have these challenges. And there's a lot of challenges. And we have competitions from US. And we are challenged on how to use it and when we can use it as well. So there are some great opportunities on a lot of things that we do already. And now I'd like to ask you one question that is perhaps very close to my heart as well. And I'm sure you will all have a lot to say on this. But what are the main consequences if the EU does too little to support the growth of the European cybersecurity companies to basically develop an attractive ecosystem for cybersecurity investments? So when I say main consequences, I mean economic, political, and societal consequences for the European cybersecurity companies. So who would like to? I see Simon already ready.
I can. So I'm very conscious. I should allow other people to speak. So, it's okay. Well, I think I've touched on it already, and clearly my colleagues are probably much better qualified than I am with regards to sovereignty. And I think having lived this life cycle for a long part of my career of being in European companies that some way, shape or form end up being predominantly US companies or Asia Pacific companies, that tends to be the life cycle that these organizations go on. There's no reason why we can't stop that. I'm not for a minute suggesting protectionist techniques, but basically putting a lot more emphasis on, for example, in terms of the supply chain, purchasing from European-centric organizations. It doesn't mean to say that you don't have to go with best in breed, but if you're purchasing a service from a European-based organization, therefore you can subscribe to that service and obtain that. I think ultimately it's about ensuring that we keep as much of that talent in European-centric organizations as opposed to losing that talent elsewhere. That only becomes an issue if we get into a situation where the allied nations start competing with each other, and I don't envisage that happening anytime soon. I'd say we had a few bumps in the road recently with regards to vaccine supply, and I think we can probably learn quite a lot around that. I think the other side of this also, and again touched on in around the G7 and the NATO conferences, is we're talking a hell of a lot about education and protection, but it's how we actually ensure that we go after the bad guys in the states that they're sitting in, and how we actually start bringing them to account. We're chasing cryptocurrency, lots of different interesting things happening there, but ultimately holding those people to account and ensuring that the risk is actually reduced somewhat, as opposed to just shoring it up constantly.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much for this. Anyone else?
Yeah, maybe I jump in from the global companies point of view. So what if when we as Siemens Energy do too less to support this pan-European ecosystem? Maybe 2 sentences to our strategy. So our strategy is the cornerstone is we energize society. So to give you an overview from a global point of view, we are responsible for about 1/6 of the complete energy supply around the globe. So 1/6 can be led back to our technologies. And we have to design resilient energy systems and guaranteeing to our customer that they are secure. And when we now take out this pan-European topic, my point of view, when we do not support as a big company, we will have a higher risk to fail in our own cornerstones of our global strategy, full stop, because our customers are distributed around the globe. To energize societies, we also have to leverage the European market with specific needs and regulations. Now we are talking again about regulations. For me, investment in innovation is a lot about new technologies and situations or scenarios in 5 to 10 years for the energy utilities. That's the reason why we are also building our an own innovation lab. We would fail to act also as diverse as possible and use everything or all levels on the market. Accordingly to all ESG factors, we have to commit to also from a company's point of view. Yeah, so we also would lose the trust maybe in the future from an investor's point of view in Siemens Energy, not in the startup itself. Yeah, we would not serve our business correct. And you said it already. I heard something, sorry to frame it a little bit blunt maybe, to tackle all the risk we need, but also to build this trusted society we will need in 10 years also in Europe. And I see a lot of protectionism and nationalisms all raising in the cybersecurity sector. And therefore, it's really also a task to stabilize society from this small facet cybersecurity. So, and we would fail when we would not take our part as a big company in that.
I thank you, Judith, on this. And, you know, when we talked about, you brought me back again to this point where we talked about education and awareness and how important it is. But then we also have to think about the investment on new technologies and technologies and sovereign technologies, and how important it is also for the EU. Anybody else on this topic?
Ilana, I can maybe chip in.
Please.
In my keynote, I've tried to explain the role of cyber insurance, and in one of the scenario analysis that we did for Europe, it was clear that we need to maintain the risk appetite of insurers and insurance carriers in underwriting cyber risk. At the moment, we have no capacity problem, but we can see that as the risks grow and adoption would grow, we need to continue to understand cyber risk and what the new technologies and all the regulations and threat landscape implies. So, and we cannot do it on our own. Like, we need, as an insurance company, a ecosystem that actually brings us closer to those risks. We need to work with European companies. We need to work with solution providers. We need to work with service providers to really give us all these signals that will enable our executive management to maintain the confidence to deploy our capital to solve this problem, right? I don't think we would be able to do it if we're not surrounded by this ecosystem that would always support us in understanding and evolving, basically. So I find the cost of not investing enough, and especially not having a healthy ecosystem, fairly big for the insurance industry, especially those that are situated here in Europe.
If I chip in also, Yelena, on this one.
Please be my guest.
So I think that one, from a security and defense perspective, one of the things that we see happening is that obviously our societies are becoming more and more dependent on telecommunications, networking, and the infrastructure in general. And we all realize that there is a sort of huge acceleration in how telecommunications are becoming fast, pervasive, high volumes of data exchanged, and etc. At some point, this will result in a complete redefinition of the concept of boundary between states, boundary between nations, boundary between Europe and non-Europe, and so far and so forth. So what we see is that when this happens, the concept of weakest link in the chain will become even more relevant than what it is today. Today, we are still struggling, we are starting to struggle seriously about defining the security perimeter of our organizations. So we don't know anymore what is the boundary of the things that we need to defend, because everything is tightly interconnected. When things such as 5G, but also software-defined ones and other emerging technologies are going to become the norm, the concept of security perimeter will become really a legacy concept. And with it, most of the techniques that were used in the past that even today are struggling will become completely inappropriate. Now, in order to face all this kind of challenge, we need to find new paradigms for defense. We need to find a new paradigm also for security, for defending our organizations, our processes, and our people. And this can only happen if we keep a stable growth in the investment and in the innovation that we bring. And this has to be done at all levels. I mean, we keep talking about Europe, but in reality, there is a sort of need to understand that maybe this goes even beyond the boundaries of the European Union. Inside the Union, there are separations, there are different levels, there are member states that go at one speed and others that go at a different speed. And this is kind of a dynamic that we see elsewhere. It's not only for Europe. So all in all, the point I'm trying to make is that the cost of inaction, the cost of not keeping the pace with these changes will be very dearly suffered by all of us at all levels, not only at the level of the European Union, but at the level of companies, like we heard just a few minutes ago, at the level of individuals, like as common citizens, we live a sort of integrated digital life, and this will become next to impossible to do if our institutions do not protect us and ensure a certain amount of freedom. So what I'm trying to say is that this is becoming more and more complicated, unfortunately, the more we go ahead. But, and we go back to the point that we were making in the beginning, the technology side is helping us, constant innovation, new things. The people side is something that should be carefully evaluated and monitored. We heard about awareness at the individual level, but if you think about awareness, you may imagine that there is a level of the individual, the person, a level of the organization, company, institution, or whatever, and a level of a system. Right now, we always focus on awareness for individuals, but what about awareness for the board, for instance? I mean, cybersecurity is now a topic that has to be brought to the level of the board of directors. It's not only a topic for employees to be aware of and to be well trained of. The same kind of awareness and training has to enter the decision-making levels of the organizations. And then if you think about the process side of the story, well, we heard about the regulation part, and it is no secret that the EU has adopted very advanced regulation. We heard about the GDPR. There is also the Cybersecurity Act, which entered into force last year. Sorry, and the NIS Directive, which is also considered to be a huge piece of regulation that is bringing forward a number of things in cybersecurity in the EU. Well, all of these are very advanced pieces of regulation and are introducing a number of changes in the processes that we need to run. The reality is that we are still struggling to adopt and to receive them. If you look at the NIS Directive, there are a number of pieces that are still, you know, nice words on a paper, but most organizations are still struggling to adopt them. So, and I'll close here. Well, what is the cost of inaction? Well, it's going to be very, very, very high if we don't speed up the process of adopting innovation in all of the three pillars.
Thank you, Mario. And you touched some points that I constantly keep talking about. The senior management, the people who are actually making decisions, making investments, and thinking about EU are the ones that we need to touch more. And obviously, a lot of people stray away because it's much harder point to tackle with the senior management, and we all know it. And they know there's something very urgent to do, but at the same time, I think a lot of people don't understand. They stray away because it's very technical, I think, in a way, and it's a black box for people, and it shouldn't be. So I really appreciated that. And when you brought this point now, I wanted to ask one thing that perhaps brought me all of the things that I've heard from all the panelists. I want to say, you know, are the public investments the only thing, and are they only sufficient investments, or do we need the private investments as well? What do you think?
Well, how much time do I have to answer this? So I think that
because I know we have many questions, but this is something that's also for me as a moderator very close to my heart, and I think we all have a lot to say, and I had to ask.
I think this is probably one of the interesting differences between the approach in the EU and the approach in NATO to cybersecurity. NATO is a very heavy consumer of cybersecurity. It's kind of less of a producer of tools and kind of stimulator for cybersecurity. This is going to change, as we said. I mean, yesterday, the Allies decided that there is going to be this new defense innovation fund, and there is going to be much more investment in innovation, stimulating innovation this time, not consuming it. From the European side, we see that there is a lot of attention in stimulating. I mean, the European Cybersecurity Organization is a great example of that, right? They are really investing a lot of resources, time and effort in stimulating the growth and the collaboration and cooperation. The reality is that innovation per se is very complicated, and it's quite complex to be reduced to only private or only public or only this or only that. It is a process that has an element of randomness somehow. There is an element of skill. We talked about it already. There is an element of environment. So the environment around innovators has to be very challenging, but at the same time, it has to be also very supporting. And so it's quite complicated to say, is it public or is it private? Surely we cannot, there would be very slow innovation if only the public sector was the one kind of pursuing it for a sort of higher in interest. And there would be very complicated innovation if only the private sector would be following that. So I suppose that the real point is the formula at the end has to be a good mix of the two. And if I can give my personal opinion on this, at the moment, probably we're not doing enough, both in the private and in the public sector in Europe, to really stimulate innovation for cybersecurity.
Thank you, Mario. I see Philip already going up with the hand, and I know we are all very passionate about the topic.
I'm sorry. Is this actually the protocol? I don't want to jump in. Anyone?
No, I actually love it because as we are doing the panel, we are also discussing among ourselves, and I think this is a beautiful thing to see.
Right. So I think. Well, thanks. Just from my perspective, I think being heavily involved in the EU funding mechanisms such as Horizon 2020, ISF, and now Horizon Europe, and also having worked with private industry, we had some research that was funded in this case by an US-based fund that focuses on cybersecurity specific. I think it definitely has to be a mix. I mean, it shouldn't come as a surprise, but I think what I see is that specifically when we're talking about research that is not necessarily profit driven or far away from the market, where you do sort of the basic research, into a new topic. I think that's where governments and the EU can play a huge role and does play a hugely important role. If you look at Horizon 2020, which with its technology readiness levels, which is currently at 9 is sort of the highest, and those projects are supposed to deliver at least prototypes, but not necessarily something that is work, So I think the role of industry, comes in when, and I fully get that, industry usually doesn't have, some of them have very deep pockets, but they still have, sort of, the market, focus on the market, something where, there should be a return on investment. Some of them do it for the corporate social responsibility, but at the end of the day, those investments are sort of have a, probably need to have a more sort of practical relevance. And I think that's where industry can come in. And it has to have that combination. I think sometimes what I see is sort of a little bit of a lack of flexibility or too strong a separation between the two. There are probably other funding mechanisms as well, but just looking at government and industry, I think, if there was sort of better and more flexible ways of merging them and coordinating them, I think that would be hugely important. Obviously, I think the expression I read was, the security depth, not the, what's the word I'm looking for? The minus that we've accumulated. So the fact that we're not investing, you're actually, accumulating a debt, that's the word. And that's what we're facing right now. We have a debt and we see the consequences, via successful attacks. But I think it's really important to have both and sort of a mix of different investment mechanisms, because especially when it comes to governments, they usually don't have that same market-driven approach. And I'm not saying that's wrong. It's just that, they I think, typically meet a different purpose than when we look at industry funding. And I've had positive experiences with both. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip, so much for this. I see Simon already going up.
So look, this is an investment event. I'm assuming there's lots of private investors or investment professionals listening to this event. I take it back to sort of Carlos's chart where he looks at seed investment and then the huge disparities when you go to Series A, B, and C. Everybody knows there's huge multiples in cybersecurity in the return. That return has got to require a degree of company investment in the skills and resources to get them qualified in that. I guarantee you it's no more complex than other investments or many other investments you may be doing. You don't have to lead the A round or the B round or the C round. You can participate in that. And I know, because I speak for a lot of them, there are a lot of European entrepreneurs that would much rather take money and expertise from a European-centric investment organization than a US organization. Unfortunately, the US organizations tend to have the cachet, which also then brings the multiples. The other side of it also is there's a big move at the moment, and obviously that ebbs and flows through the years and through economic cycles, to IPO. How many IPOs of technology companies do you see in European exchanges compared to NASDAQ? Now, I think there's probably an opportunity for us to take a very, very close look as to why that is. We can all discuss that, I'm sure, until the cows come home. But ultimately, we need to be looking in a number of different areas. Another area I think that's worthwhile looking at is, or putting more emphasis on, is looking at European investment, and again, this sort of fund of funds, where it's a public-private partnership, and actually having that European-centric VC type of organization, that private equity type of organization. Surely there's something we can be doing there as well, because there's cash, there's lots of it in Europe, there's lots of skills in Europe, there's lots of investment companies in Europe. It's just a case of, for many of these organizations that traditionally haven't invested in cybersecurity, is taking the step forward. And there is expertise out there that are very, very keen and willing to help. Not just the people on this panel, but around the whole of Europe, you can find this expertise.
I couldn't have said it better than you, Simon, on this topic. And I almost feel like I need to be in a panel seat to say my things, but now I'm a moderator. But given the time we have, I want to also take up some of the questions from our audience. So one of the questions we had is, in your opinion, is today being cybersecurity made EU a real differentiator against the non-EU competition? If not, should it be, and how would you encourage companies in preferring EU companies? Who would like to take it? Don't take it all at once.
if I may, Jelena, if I may start.
Please go ahead.
One of the elements that were contained in the Cybersecurity Act is the push to establish a certification scheme. So basically a sort of standardization of tools and techniques and processes that a company should follow to ensure a baseline, a kind of a base level of cybersecurity, and so ensure that its supply chain is being properly managed and the product that they are selling is really presents some basic levels of security. And I believe that this is one element that could really encourage consumers to approach these kind of products. The big element that we see is that due to some of the challenges that you were mentioning, so cybersecurity is considered like a black box and it's complicated to understand and etc. It should be made much easier and so more evident, and certification is probably one of the vehicles to do that. For a consumer to say, yeah, I buy this product from this company because it's certified, I trust that the certification mechanism is valid and verifiable, and so I believe that I'm doing I'm having a better deal than what I could do. Obviously, this is a mechanism that requires an incredible amount of efforts, because you need to establish trust, you need to establish mechanisms that again are verifiable, understandable, and so far and so forth. One of the big discussions on the certification schemes was about making it mandatory or voluntary. And as we all know, basically, eventually the legislator decided to make it voluntary, which is kind of complicated to understand for a customer, and maybe is not creating all the value that it was intended to create. Nevertheless, I believe that this is one of the vehicles that could be used for that.
Thank you, Mario, so much for this. Anyone else has anything to say on this?
I could go again, but I'm very aware that other people are not getting a word in edgeways, so I keep quiet.
Okay, maybe we have it after. I think we should just have a separate meeting after this, all of us. But there is one question to Ali, and I know, Ali, you're pressed with time as well, but there's one question for you. If you could quantify the typical ROI of €1 spent on cybersecurity processes, tools, awareness, in terms of saved cyber insurance fees. For example, does it pay off to protect oneself well?
Well, it's a very tricky question. I think it's extremely hard to put one number, right? In terms of, if I spent this €1 on cybersecurity, this is what I'm going to save on cyber insurance. Or in general, this is how much reduction my, overall risk exposure I could achieve with this €1. It obviously depends on where that euro is being spent on, how it's being spent on, what sort of business you're in, the size of your business, etc. So there are a lot of elements. What I can say is the models that we use to price cyber risks and obviously calculate the premiums or even decide if we're willing to take on that risk or not have a really wide spectrum. So companies that are good and are, let's say, above the pack have, according to our models, significantly less exposure to cyber risks. Companies that are, let's say, behind the pack have, in comparison, 8 to 10 times more cyber risk exposure. And in a lot of cases, they wouldn't even be offered meaningful coverages or affordable policies. So in a lot of senses, in my opinion, it pays to invest in cybersecurity. Obviously, you have to be smart in the way you deploy your limited resources. And that's a whole conversation that we can have, how to bridge the gap between the technology managers, CISOs, and upper management. But it certainly pays to have any amount of money spent in cybersecurity, not only to get access to cyber insurance and potentially at a price that is affordable or meaningful, but also in terms of reducing your overall cyber exposure.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ali. I'd like to ask Judith something. Judith, on the main economic consequences for European international player as Siemens is, does Europe do too little to support the growth of European cybersecurity companies? And when I ask this, I think about economic impact, ability to impact our business. And what is your opinion on this?
Yeah, to look at it from a Siemens Energy point, as I mentioned already, we are driving this topic on a global scale. And what I see when I shout out to the community, especially for innovation topics in the energy utility sector, and we do not only reach out to our customers because the customers really see the threats and know what they need. When I shout out to ventures or to startups, I immediately driven somewhere out of Europe from this global perspective. So when we come as a global entity, Siemens Energy as an independent company, and I do not redirect exactly, and I want to have it on a European level, I will end up somewhere else. So that's an outside in from my point of view as a customer in this venture topic. And to be honest, we saw in the past, I was in the financial sector, in the banking sector, as well as now in the energy sector as responsible for a supplier. We see it different when we shout out to the market and say, as security experts, really knowledgeable and know what to do in some cases, when we get in contact with regulatory people and with these regulations around. That's the same in the US as well as in Europe, so would not make a difference. But it's easier to talk then on a continental scale, maybe not in Europe. So that's what I want to overcome currently. I really want to be also attractive as a Siemens Energy for ventures, for startups, that we get into a communication chain, to say so. But when I have to look at my business, I have to do or to take into account a lot of other topics. And what we saw in the regulations in the last years, when we export regulations, you had a very good example with the GDPR. These drives then also a reversal mindset thinking, to say so. We are now in a state after GDPR, some years after that release, and that it was taken over also by other countries, that also boards of directors, which are educated, are thinking in a different way. So as head of cyber in my company, I have the task to educate on these topics, what will be in 5 years the case, not only on technology. And it's not about awareness, it's simply how to drive business. And yeah. Hope that tackles the question.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Judith, on this one. Given the time, and I know we have discussed so much on our preparation, and there's so many things that we want to say, and I think definitely I feel like we need a separate meeting for us just in private to talk about a lot of things. But I wanted to ask you all if you had some concluding remarks from each one of you that you would like to express out here, given what we are representing today, what we are doing today with this conference. So please go ahead. Whoever would like to start first with some concluding remarks.
Yeah, maybe I start. I really want to encourage all the people who listened and who will now step into the conference and in all their talks, please stay passionate, stay vigilant, really approach also big ones as a government as well as companies. So stay on your road and step forward. So it's really a topic out of my heart that we support on this way. Full stop.
And it's a beautiful one. Mario, I see you smiling. Please go ahead. I just speak you.
Yes, so I will just kind of echo what Philip was saying in his introductory statement. Cybersecurity now is becoming such a challenge that it's very hard to make it alone. And so the big leitmotif for the next years will be to find even better ways to cooperate and collaborate at all levels, individuals, organizations, international organizations, nations. There must be something more that we can do to increase cooperation. The reality is that the type of threats and the type of new attack vectors that we are seeing cannot really be fought by any individual. We really need to get together and to do better when we are together to contrast our opponents. And this is going to become even more important in the near future because of what we said before, because of the fact that information technology is going to become even more pervasive than what it is today. So in a word, cooperation and collaboration is key.
I think for me, it's making sure we are crystal clear on the goal. And if we're talking about investment and how we invest in European cybersecurity, let's have a very, very well-defined set of goals and be laser focused on achieving those goals. My biggest concern in all these conversations is we have a lovely conversation at a conference, unfortunately not face-to-face, and then we go away and go back to our day jobs. How do we actually drive that forwards? How do we ensure ensure against scope creep, which concerns me, significantly? We have all of the assets in Europe. We just need to be very, very, very focused on how we bring those assets to bear and how we actually look to drive that and look upon this as a 20 to 30 year project. Again, if you look at Silicon Valley, think about how long they've been doing that. If you look at the Israeli cybersecurity marketplace and the ecosystem there, think about how long they've been doing that. So we need to have a longer vision out as to how we're going to do that, but be laser focused in the task.
Thank you, Simon.
Maybe I can go next. I think we cannot afford to leave demand stimulus to cyber criminals, because as much as we talk about supply stimulus now, I think having true pull effect to European ecosystem would come from the demand side. So we have to really work hard on setting better standards, be more vigilant in enforcing them, and across the board help, all the way from small to large companies in getting better at cyber hygiene and provide the right economic incentives to do it right. And a final word, maybe we do that on a constant basis in our own companies. I presume. Do we have the right ambition? Right? Are we ambitious enough, basically, in the targets that we set for innovation? Because if you're not, you run the risk of becoming irrelevant in 5 to 10 years, and that's, I think, the something we cannot afford to do. So we have to constantly challenge our own goals, ambitions when it comes to innovation in cyber, and adapt it to the changing dynamics of the market.
Thank you very much. Philip?
Thank you, Yelena. And I think, well, I could just say, what my previous, fellow panel member said. But I think I'm trying to combine two. I fully support what Mario said. We've been working on this topic before, so we need to continue that. But also to Simon's point, and I'm using Microsoft's quote now. The collaboration, sharing has been the thoughts and prayers for the cybersecurity community. We've been hearing this for decades now. Every conference, we go, it's like, we need to work together, we need to share information, by the way, it never happens. It seems to be one of the hardest things. And there are many, many reasons for that. I don't have an answer to that, but we need to really work hard to make that happen. And I want to also touch upon something that Judith said very initially, and something, and I said that's close to my heart, but I think, when we talk about innovation, obviously sometimes the focus, at least based on my experience, is on the financial funding, right? And honestly, if somebody were to tell me, well, guess what, Europol will receive 10 million euros, and we're like, no, please don't give us the money because we don't have the resources. We don't have the people power to implement that. We don't have the project managers. We don't have the financial experts. We don't have the experts to actually do that. So I think what I'm trying to say is we need to have the human resources that go with that. We need to have the mindset. We need to do something about the brain drain that we're seeing now in the EU. Some of you mentioned that before. Look at the AI. Just look at the number of publications in that area where people work and then where they end up working. We're still very strong when it comes to publications, but at the end of the day, those people, experts, don't necessarily work for EU-based companies. So I think, instilling this mindset also, which is, if you look at the US, that's very, everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. This is not necessarily something that you'd see like in my country, Austria, people are very, conservative. I want to have a 30-year job with that company. I'm not going to be an entrepreneur. That's changing now, but it's still, I think the mindset needs to be there as well. So I think from my perspective, when we talk about investment, I think it's sort of, it has to have, the financial means have to go hand in hand with the infrastructure. And training and instilling that mindset in young people and other older generations as well. I don't want to, age discriminate here, but I think, that's important as well. And as a last point, there's a great initiative that came out of the UK, hashtag safety tech, this idea, just like we have fintech, create something around that. So it's a lot of PR as well, and it picked up in Germany as well, company just not focusing on cybersecurity, but also cyber safety, which is also around, online harm, human-centric approach to technology. And I think, there's a huge PR possibility as well for the EU to position ourselves, stronger in that space. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So here we've heard a lot of things, and I think I agree. I really support all the points you've given. You've talked about collaboration, awareness, clear goals, that we cannot afford to give demands to the attackers, that we cannot afford not to be ambitious enough. And one of the biggest things we talked about is the lack of resource, and we do face it. And I would like to take that point out and say, it's a main part of what we are doing here today of this conference. And if we don't make it happen on the EU level, and if we don't make enough investments on the things that we need, be it private or public, and if we don't invest in the EU cybersecurity ecosystem, we will definitely not be able to make this happen, and people and resources will go somewhere else. So I think you just brought up all the points that made me think of the conclusions when I was listening to all of you, giving your all final points. So I really thank you for this. Thank you. It's been a great panel, and I really think that we can do a lot more behind the scenes together. And I think, Philip, you have some great things that you're doing that you already told the EIB, for example. And I think we can work on a lot of things together where we can collaborate and do great things. So thank you, everybody. I really enjoyed a lot this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for the moderation.
And we're back. Jelena, I want to thank you for an extraordinary moderation of the panel. These big panels are always hard, but you did an astounding job. I know for a fact that we were getting a lot of very good comments about this. So well done, and well done to all your panelists, because it was very, very interesting. And essentially, you kind of rounded up very well today's event and all the challenges that we have around cybersecurity. And it was interesting to listen to the final thoughts, because one of them eventually, like this constant, we need to collaborate more, we need to collaborate more, we need to share more stuff. And I wonder if one of the major challenges is that we have too much information, right? Before we had not enough information. Now we have so many agencies, so many startups, so many people sharing things that eventually becomes really hard to keep a tab on what's going on. But it was very enlightening. I sincerely hope that the panelists can actually get together and join forces. It's always hard. I've been involved in the startup ecosystem for more than 20 years now, and it takes time, but eventually core groups get together, collaborations set in place, and with the big help of the money, basically the whole ecosystem kind of pushes through. I know we were saying, right, we've been talking about this for years, but it just takes time. Especially, I used to work many years ago in cybersecurity when this wasn't really something you would talk about. You were the strange one if you were working in cybersecurity. I was kind of on the hacker side, good hacker side, and it was, the perception was on one side good, on the other side it was quite negative for a lot of people. So there's something to be said about role models and putting it to the younger generations that this is not just for extreme engineers. It actually goes connected to the fact that we had Jelena here with us, and the role that women can actually have in the cybersecurity space, which rarely gets shown, and that we saw today. And without further ado, I want to finish today's, oops, let me go there. Today's event with some final words from three guests. Some of them you have it, but so we close off this first day of the event. And so I'm going to call all three of them that we have them right here with now. So let me introduce you, Javier Dieguez. He's the director of the Basque Cybersecurity Center. Javier, welcome with us. Brendan McDonough, he's the European Investment Advisor Hub. He's an advisor at the European Investment Advisory Hub. Hello, Brendan, and of course, our own Luigi Rebuffi, Secretary General of ECSO. Luigi, welcome back. So all three of them, thank you very much. And we are looking forward for these final words. So Javier, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being there until the end of the event. My name is Javier Dieguez, as it has been mentioned. I'm the director of the Basque Cybersecurity Center, a regional agency. And I work in ECSO, involved in the working group 2.3, aiming international cooperation, global competitiveness and support to export. And you can imagine that the last year has been really challenging to achieve the initiatives of this working group. But I'm not here to talk about this. I'd like to get back to November 2020, when ECSO impulsed an initiative where more than 40 investors of different categories signed a letter of interest for the European Commission to express the need to create something, some kind of political support to promote investment in European cybersecurity startups and SMEs in order to achieve strategic autonomy while preserving the local economy. One of the signers of said letter was the Basque Agency for Business Development, represented in ECSO by us, by the Basque Cybersecurity Center. Today, ECSO has given me the opportunity to announce, precisely in an event called Cyber Investor Day, that the BCSC, the Basque Cybersecurity Center, is promoting an agreement together with the European Investment Basque Bank's Advisory Hub to launch a feasibility study for the European Cybersecurity Investment Platform. The strategic objective is to promote and attract international investments in European cybersecurity startups and SMEs to keep and develop competence and strategic solution within Europe. We are talking about a public-private collaboration initiative promoted by the Basque Cybersecurity Center, where the European Commission will be involved, financed by the European Investment Bank's Advisory Hub, and supported by ECSO as a key strategic participant. The real added value of this initiative will be that it goes beyond the intention of simply distributing public European funding, like the ones inside the Next Generation Europe, to national private initiative. We will work with the European Investment Bank's Advisory Hub to design the best financial mechanism to stimulate the emergence of a new pan-European specialized cybersecurity, but also to create a dedicated support program to develop marketing and access to market capacity of European companies. The European Cybersecurity Investment Platform might be a key success factor to impulse better financing of European cyber companies, so they can compete, let's say, better with American, British, or Israeli players that are setting the pace currently. They are setting the pace of the industry and the market. We think Europe needs a stronger cyber sector to reduce technological dependence, as it has been mentioned many times today, from other economies. And this is one of the main concerns that the European Commission will face in the coming years. Finally, I'd like to end calling your attention to the role regions can play in the future developments of the European cybersecurity industry. We very much believe that regions are primarily the hubs where capabilities, competence, and specialization opportunities are concentrated. The Basque Country might be a good example, as well as a well-recognized industrial and technological cybersecurity hub. But there are some others that are worth highlighting, such as Brittany region, Central Finland, North Rhine-Westphalia, or The Hague, to give some examples. Consequently, the initiative with the European Investment Bank will leverage on the existing Smart Regions platform, previously called Cyber Voice. We have before us an unbeatable, perhaps historic opportunity to make a difference and boost the cybersecurity made in Europe. And I'm confident that we will be smart enough to take it. Thank you very much, and I will end with this.
Thank you very much, Javier. That was a pleasure. Also, I'm in Madrid right now, so hello to the Basque Country, all the way from Madrid. Please, Brandon, floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. Thank you to Javier for the kind remarks about the European Investment Hub and the European Investment Advisory Hub role. Let me give you a little background on the advisory. I suppose lots of people listening may be familiar with EIB as a large bank, but what's interesting, and I call it the hidden gem, is the European Investment Advisory Hub within it, whereby we work with private and public promoters to help them develop their project through to being ready for finance. Or a second role we have is to look at new growth sectors and areas of business development in Europe and how we can help stimulate and grow that sector. And it is in that light that we are happy to work with Javier and the Basque Region Cybersecurity Center and also ECSO on this important work to help drive the sector. I think it's interesting from the discussion this afternoon, cybersecurity is now gaining such great attention in the one sense, but it's attention it's gaining as a result of people's fears, it impacting on countries, on businesses, and on individuals. But it is a business opportunity within Europe too, and we saw statistics and evidence that Europe lags behind. So there is a call to action, and I think what you're getting this evening is confirmation that action is being taken. Europe, the COVID pandemic has highlighted even more the deep dependence on the internet and exposed cybersecurity weaknesses. And we've heard comments from Europol, from the likes of NATO only yesterday, commenting on the dangers of cybersecurity. But again, it's important. It is a business opportunity out there for many investors, for many businesses to drive and grow the economic sector in Europe and to position Europe not just as a follower, but as a leader in an important area. And the EIB is active in cybersecurity already. It is an eligible sector where we provide investment. We have done investments in about 230 million over the last few years, provided that in the areas of the development of cybersecurity technologies and in the areas of purchase of equipment, covering sectors like telecommunications, energy, transport networks, financial services, and healthcare. Some notable examples in the 5G sector would be with the likes of Ericsson and KPN. Now, the EIB does not have a branch network in every town, so we work on volume and scale and large projects. However, our sister agency, the European Investment Fund, does provide investment in cybersecurity and technology funds. And in that way, we provide investment down to the younger, early stage, smaller investments and younger companies. And we have done some investments across Europe with companies too, in the likes of Nexus in Sweden, Clavister also in Sweden, and CS Communications and System in France. Now, going back to the advisory work, we have within the advisory area both a team that focus on innovation finance, and they have produced a number of relevant studies on quantum technology, artificial intelligence and blockchain, 5G, supercomputing, microelectronics and photonics, and also space sector. So the European Investment Advisory Hub is based on a format where we get a request from a promoter. And in this case, we're delighted that the Basque Cybersecurity Centre and Javier have submitted that in collaboration and requested that ECSO partake in the study with us. And we're very delighted that they can, led by very competent Danilo. And we see that as a great opportunity to get that local knowledge, industry expertise, and investor expertise to help produce a piece of work that will support further investment in cybersecurity through the assessment of, the feasibility examination of, and also the design of an investment platform, which would facilitate both public money, but also private money to put more, as I call it, food on the table for the cybersecurity companies to grow and develop their business. And as was referenced earlier, to also stay in Europe and continue to be European companies. Too often we see them having to move for finance-related activities, and this is something that I think Europe is very conscious of. We need European companies to continue to grow and stay within Europe. And lastly, I would say this is an opportunity to also recognize that companies themselves, it's not just about finance. Often it's about knowledge, both to the investor and to the actual end recipient. And in that light, we often add advisory support services to national promotion banks or individually directly to companies if the scale of investment is sufficient to support that investment and activity. So we're delighted to start this work, delighted to have the request from Javier, and we look forward to driving the European agenda, and the call to action has been heard and we are moving forward with this work. Thank you.
Brendan, thank you very much. Very, very wise words. It's so important to be able to unlock that money. I always say, like, sometimes we leave money on the table because we don't know how to access it. So your role at the advisory hub is extremely critical for the coming age. And last but not least, I want to welcome to say the final words to our own Luigi Rebuffi. Luigi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, a few words because time is running. Allow me just to thank Javier for being the promoter of such requests on behalf of the regional cybersecurity platform and the ECSO community. But also thank to the EIB, to Brendan, that will soon provide us and the community with the elements for moving forward in this ambitious initiative for a fund of fund. Well, ambitious was a word that has been used by Simon in his last words. Are we in Europe, do we have enough in Europe the right ambition? I think sometimes we are too shy. We are too shy, especially in a sector where we clearly see is booming, cybersecurity, where we clearly see that there are business opportunities, as Brendan has mentioned. The risk is not that big. And we have on top of that also the need to support security, which could be national security, security of the economy, of the society. So there are many good reasons to moving on with investments. And I think that the private investments have well understood that. We have now too much to develop this fund of fund, the private money with the public money, to make something which is much bigger of what we are today. Carlos showed that Europe is still lagging behind at international level. This is fundamental, as been said, not only for making business, but also to look at the issues that has been discussed about sovereignty, and not only to technology, but also to competence, to services, to skills. So, in the last words is, I will close with a question. Is Europe, considering all this trend, still willing to remain fragmented, or really start working together for the common growth of the recovery after the pandemic? I think the answer is clear, but up to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luigi, for those very important words and those final reflections. Very true. Very good question to close this first day of the 9 Cyber Investor Days. Thank you very much all for being here with us, for granting your time to be here, to our speakers, to our organizers, to our sponsors, to all the audience that have been here with us. Thank you very much for being there. Thank you very much for putting the questions to our panelists before. And just a quick reminder of what we still have on board for tomorrow. So do remember, tomorrow we're going to go through the pitching sessions, where at the end we will select, or the judges will select the first 2 nominees of the European awards, Cybersecurity Awards. At the same time, we will have a panel on European scale-ups, so you cannot miss that part. And investors, remember that the platform is still open to set up your one-on-one meetings with our startups. Very important that we keep talking, that we keep strengthening, and as Luigi said a moment ago, to connect the private and the public money to keep financing our ecosystem. And last but not least, we will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Central European Time, 9 a.m. if you're in Portugal. Thank you again very much to our hosts for hosting this 9 Cyber Investor Days. This was Alex Barrera. It was my pleasure sharing this day with you. See you all tomorrow. Have fun.